Hello.
No, but we are going to start the performance.
Hey, what's up, man? En vidéoconférence? Oui, oui, ça va, c'est bon. Il ne me voit pas, il m'entend.
Ah, ok.
Bien.
Very pleasant.
If we all mute. So the people who are here who are far away. If we can move that.
Yeah.
I like your I didn't know you were
Oh, no, well, it's like, you know, the
Maybe the panel can sit there because after on the performance you guys somewhere there.
انجليش يلا يلا كمان براتيك بس كل براتيك يلا هو حرقها ما حرق يا ولا مري ساكن ما جولو Era di direct Giappone che metteva. Yeah.
Just a little welcome, a tiny note. This is our first philosophy salon. I hope you guys will become part of it. Once a month, every third Thursday. Today is World Philosophy Day being celebrated at UNESCO. So we have started this little endeavor with UNESCO. And I'm very grateful to my UNESCO partners, Camille Stair and John Crawley, who's, you can see the bio, he's the mind behind all the thoughts and discussions. And the next one for December will be December 16th. I'll send you more details on that. Could you just speak a little, introduce yourself?
ありがとう、ちょっとありがとうございます。今日はありがとうございます。今日3曲しました。私たちは、同じ、ミュージックカレッジを、グラジュエートして、もう10年ぐらい会っていなかったんですが、このコンサートのために再会して、はい、そうですね。それで久しぶりに一緒に演奏した。彼は専門はサックスです。はい。だけれどもピアノ、今日はピアノ、はい。それさんの娘さんのサックスの先生をされていて、今はねなんですけれども、私はその後輩として今日ははい呼んでいただきました。はい、それさん今日はありがとうございました。
My English is not.
No, there, but you're saying. Okay.
She's Anami Moro. She graduated from Kunitachi Musical College. And she was in Italy for
2 years.
in Milano for 3 years. And the other man is Mr. Otake Sosaku, and she told us that they didn't need 10 years, but because of today's occasion, this was a very good chance for them to see each other after 10 years. That was that.
Thanks to Otake-san, he made this happen, and he has been my younger daughter's saxophone. So, shall we move to the discussion, because we already have audience on Zoom, and John is there, right? Yeah. Let's see. Camille? Yeah. I want her unmuted so she can introduce. John?
Yes, hello, Sonia. Hi from Paris. How are you?
Good. So if you could take it from here.
With pleasure. Can everyone see and hear me in Tokyo?
Seeing part is not that great. Some of us can see, not everyone.
Okay. But you're not missing anything. And in this context, the voice is more important. Hello to everyone connecting online from all around the world, as I am from Paris. It's really a great pleasure to moderate this discussion in the context of World Philosophy Day 2021. I worked for UNESCO for many years, so I've often had occasion to moderate discussions in the context of World Philosophy Day. It's an event to which I am very much attached. This is the first time that, having left UNESCO to do other things, I am intervening in World Philosophy Day in another capacity. And what I'd like to do here is not make a speech, but give the opportunity for a discussion in Tokyo, and of course also with our audience all around the world, on an issue that doesn't sound like a philosophical issue. So I will make some words of introduction, and I'll also read a couple of poems and play you a song. Play in the YouTube sense, in this case. I'm not going to play you a song live, to try and explain why we're talking about islands in the first place and why this is an interesting subject. In order to discuss these issues, I have the great pleasure to be joined by His Excellency, Monsieur Pierre Fering, Ambassador of Luxembourg to Japan, by Dr. Milanga, gynecologist by profession and specialism, and Mr. Teddy Jimbo, journalist. So I'll be giving them the floor in a moment and giving them the opportunity to say what they think about the ideas I've been throwing out. But first, maybe some introduction. Why are we talking about islands? It's not World Geography Day, is it? It's World Philosophy Day. And it's pretty obvious how you would talk about islands in a geography seminar. But why in a philosophy day? And what struck me in designing this event with Sonia is how rich the concept of an island is in philosophical terms, how deeply it runs through our culture. And perhaps if you think back to films you have seen and novels you have read, you will recall some of these islands that have been very important, not just literally, but also conceptually. Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, about pirates and the adventures of young people in a world that wasn't yet flat and completely occupied. Treasure Island as the exemplar of something new to be discovered. The Island of Dr. Moreau, H.G. Wells' novel, which has been filmed several times, where the island is the space within which strange experiments can take place, experiments based on vivisection and the transformation of weird chimerical creatures. The point being, you can only do this kind of thing on an island. But of course, an island could equally be a highly secure biology lab, not surrounded by water, but surrounded by a barbed wire fence. And that's the key point. An island doesn't have to be literally a geographical island to be cut off and to be a space of strange experimentation. Think of the first James Bond film, Dr. No, from Ian Fleming's novel of the same name. It takes place on an island. The bad guy, Dr. No, has transformed the island into his private space for his fantasies of world domination. Again, it doesn't have to be surrounded by water. We can think of many examples, both fictional and real, of islands surrounded, as I said, by barbed wire that serve the same function. And just finally, because we could go on all evening just quoting films and novels, was Jurassic Park in Steven Spielberg's film? It's on an island, because only on an island can that kind of strange, weird, and ultimately dangerous experiment take place. So in literature and in film, islands have been this space of weirdness and strangeness ever since the invention of the genre of fantasy and science fiction and horror. But of course, at the same time, islands have other functions in popular culture, both literal islands and metaphorical islands. And to illustrate this, I'd like to read you some poems. They're short poems. And I would also like to play you a song, as I said. And for that, I need to share my screen. I'm not absolutely sure that I can share YouTube and you get the audio, but let's try. And if it doesn't work, at least you'll know which song you can look for on YouTube when you have a moment. Someone needs to authorize me to share my screen, please. Can that be arranged?
Pardon me?
They give you the right of host or co-host or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. It's all in Japanese.
Thank you very much. That's done.
You have access to it now?
Yes, that's fine.
Can you
I'm
hear
sharing my
that?
screen now.
And
the
John,
first
can you
thing-
hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine. I can still see you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. Are the letters big enough? Of course, I'll be reading this poem, but I think it's easier if you can
The
see it
panel can
at the
see
same time.
very well, and the rest of the guests can, some of them can see, not everybody.
Okay, and of course, I will be reading it, and you can look it up if you're interested. The
And
first poem I
next
wanted
time
to
we'll have-
read is one of the most famous poems that mentions the word island. It's a poem by the English poet John Donne, written in the 1620s, so a quite old poem, which goes as follows. It's short, I will read it in full. No man is an island, entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thine own or of thine friends were. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Those of you familiar with 20th century literature probably know that the phrase "for whom the bell tolls" has been used a number of times by other writers in homage to Donne's poem, in particular by Ernest Hemingway, who gave it that as the title to his novel of the Spanish Civil War, "For Whom the Bell Tolls." What Donne is saying, of course, in saying that no man is an island, is that no man is isolated, a word that in English comes from the Italian word for island. No man is insulated, a word that in English comes from the Latin word for island, against others. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. So the island here is not a literal island. It is a metaphorical way of stating the connectedness and solidarity between humans. And by contrast, that means that an island philosophy, a philosophy of being an island, would be a philosophy of isolation and insulation. And interestingly, there's a well-known song that exactly follows those lines. And let me see if YouTube and Zoom allow me to share it with you. I know you can see the screen. Let's see if when I play this, you can also hear the audio.
Because the audio is going through this headphone.
Yes.
That's a good one. That's right. That's right.
Maybe he can sing along.
We have to say to him, remove the headphones, and it might work.
Yeah, probably. That's
No, that's just the echo. John? We don't hear the song. John?
He can't hear you because he's listening to it.
Yes, hello?
Hear you. Well, we cannot hear.
Sorry?
We cannot hear the song.
You cannot hear the song. In that case, why don't you play it at your end on some device? I'll send the link. And can you play it? Because otherwise it's a bit of a waste of time. Sorry, I didn't realize that the sound wouldn't be transferred to Zoom. Thank you. Very good. I'll let you listen.
Do you play full song or?
Next time, we have to connect you with the moderator before you plan the song.
Yes.
I'll never try.
Thank you. I think you can see why I wanted to play that song for you. It is effectively and probably deliberately, because Paul Simon was a very literate person. It's a kind of anti-paraphrase of Don's poem. The narrator, the protagonist of the song, is effectively turning Don on his head, and saying, I am an island. Remember the first line of Don's poem, no man is an island? Simon's character responds, I am. And a rock feels no pain, an island never cries. And we could go through all the words of the song with the vocabulary of isolation and insulation to see the extent to which it's entirely based on this conceptual idea of an island as a kind of space from which connectedness is removed. And in that respect, I'd like to read a third poem, also short, a very famous poem by W.B. Yeats called The Lake Isle of Innisfree, which adds an additional twist to this metaphorical language of islands. The poem is on the screen, but I'll read it for you. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the veils of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, an evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core. The poem was written in 1888, one of the earliest of Yeats' poems. And you see the point. If you want to get away from the world, you go to an island. But instead of the rather bitter, aggressive tone of Paul Simon's protagonist, alone against the world, this is about going to the island, an island in the middle of a lake, which does actually exist in County Sligo in Ireland, and find peace there. But peace still in the form of disconnectedness. The peace you can't have when you're standing on the roadway or on the pavement's grey. In other words, in the middle of the modern world, surrounded by the bustle and hustle of a city or even a town or even a village. To get peace, go to an island. Now, this version of the concept of an island is very powerful in our modern culture, has been since the 19th century, was so even in the 17th century in Europe, as Don's poem shows, and probably goes back even further. The earliest work, or the second earliest work of European literature, the Odyssey, is all about islands. Partly, of course, because that's where the Greeks of those days lived. Islands were part of what it was to be Greek, but also because many of the islands in Homer's poem perform these powerful conceptual, almost mythical functions, truly mythical functions. The island of Circe, the magician, for instance, is basically Dr. Moreau's island. And every version of the magical island controlled by a sorcerer, whether it's Circe herself in the Odyssey, Dr. Moreau in Wells' novel, or the Richard Attenborough character in Jurassic Park, all of these are ultimately the same archetype. But that's not the only way we think about islands. Islands have other imaginaries completely opposite to the first. Islands are places of trade and exchange. They're places where the peoples of the sea live, shipping peoples, who go on dangerous journeys to far distant lands to bring back spices and other forms of wealth and indeed new knowledge. Island peoples have often thought of themselves as projected outside, not as sheltering inside, whether the islands of Polynesia, which were peopled over the last 4,000 years by extremely intrepid explorers, getting on small boats, following the stars, probably in many cases getting lost, but in some cases finding new lands and founding new kingdoms. And of course, this is how the English think of themselves. Now, England is not strictly an island, of course. There's a land border with Scotland and with Wales. But as you know, the English tend to forget that. The English think of themselves as an island race, to use the old language of the 18th and 19th century. But in doing so, they think of themselves not as confined within their island, but as projecting themselves outside. So which is it? Is the island the place of isolation, or is it the place of connection? Is it where you go to find peace, or where you leave from to trade with the world and perhaps conquer many parts of it? Why this ambivalence about what islands in the literal geographical sense mean, which is also, of course, an ambivalence about the metaphorical usages of the term island? So what I'd like to invite our panelists to do is just reflect on those questions, the questions of isolation and connectedness, the questions of insulation and trade, the questions of solidarity and autonomy. Those are the questions that at the philosophical level, I think, arise from the primarily geographical, but also richly metaphorical language of islands. And with that in mind, what I'd like to do is invite His Excellency, Mr. Ferring, to make some comments in any direction that you wish on on these themes. As you said in an email in the preparation of this event, coming from a landlocked country in the middle of the European continent, thinking about islands isn't obvious. but maybe I've given you some entry points that will allow you to reflect not on what it is for Luxembourg to be an island, though maybe it is in some metaphorical sense, but at least how this understanding of insularity, of being an island, can be coded in the context that you find interesting or are familiar with. Can I give you the floor?
Sure. That's Mike.
You hear me, John?
Yes, very well, thanks.
Yeah. Hello, so from Tokyo to Paris, bonsoir. Very
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir from Tokyo. And it was fascinating to listen to you, John. To be honest, that was my impression when I listened now. After this expose, you have made life very difficult for any of the speakers of the who now come. Thank you so for giving me the privilege to speak first, because, and also, yes, we had a little email exchange before, and indeed, Luxembourg, we are a landlocked country, landlocked, surrounded by Belgium, Germany, and France. And in my personal case, I was 20 years old before the first time even I came to an island. I had the chance to visit an island. I was a student, and I went to Corsica. I want to visit the birthplace of a big French emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. And so that was my first contact with an island. Islands for me, when I was a young boy in Luxembourg, and there are not even many islands in Luxembourg lakes. So island is a very rare thing to have in Luxembourg. It was for me associated with adventure, with dreamings about the white world. When I was a young boy, I was reading, I've mentioned many references about islands. I was dreaming about Robinson Crusoe, this famous story of an islander who became king on his island. And when we speak about islands, also the question comes up, what is an island? Geographically speaking, an island is land surrounded by water, I would guess. So I could even say that Australia is an island to some extent, but I think that the atmosphere of the Australians wouldn't agree with me, by the way. They consider themselves a continent, that is also fine. But to some extent, when we speak about islands, I think that what we have in mind also in those Hollywood movies like Jurassic Park, these islands are never too big, they're not too small, but the islands are big enough to have their own ecosystem. And then on these islands, we can develop a life. There's a society, autonomous society, and more or less separated from the rest of the world. Now, I'm saying this because I think that the definition of an island is per se a very neutral term. It's simply a land surrounded by water. And I think that much of the, also in metaphoric sense, of the perception we have, it's our perception of the islands that gives the sense to the island. Per se, I think that an island is a neutral term. It's only we, by our own personality, by our own character, by the ideas that we associate with an island, we give it a meaning, I think. And this is true. We had all over the history, we had also islands like this famous French novel about Papillon, the prisoner of the island of the devil, l'île de l'enfer. And this is a famed Papillon, the movie later on. And that was obviously an island I would not be very keen to be on. It was an island of prison. And then we had islands like Ellis Island in front of New York, where many immigrants from Europe arrived, and that was maybe after a few hours stays, that was for them the entry gate into a new world. And we also, I think, when we are on an island, and you look to the border of an island, for me, islands were never a place of closeness. For me, it was reaching out to the world, because you are to the seas. And when we look at it, the sea is basically a huge highway to the world. If you are a landlocked country, it's I think it was in before we invented the plane, more easy to go by ship, by boat in the 19th century to Japan than to go through Russia and Siberia and some part to China, and then I need again to cross the sea. And so I think that the seas that surround the island give us a glimpse of the openness of the world. So I would think that the islands, you have mentioned, John, those three references, and we have got the pleasure to listen to Simon and Garfunkel, I'm a Rock. I feel always when I listen to that song some pain. It's some pain you can feel in your soul when you listen to that song, at least for me, because it's anyway subjective. And then we had John Donne. For myself, I have much sympathy for the poem of John Donne, that we are part of a bigger whole, that we all, even if we are on an island or not, that we are all part of a bigger world. Because now in particular, because the topic, if I read here on the program correctly, being an island in the context of the pandemic. And I think that the last year and also this year has shown to what extent we are human beings are social beings. For me, what I have missed the most during this pandemic was the contact to other human beings, frequent contacts, being able to drink and to laugh and without a mask if possible. And that is all. And I think that human beings are social beings. And I think that John Donne's poem is reflective of this to some extent in how he is describing it when the bell tolls. It was this famous book also by Hemingway and the movie later on. And I have even good memories of that movie. And by the way, not now very sophisticated in literature, John, I have to admit. And but Simon and Garfunkel, yeah, there's a pain. It is also possible. I may from time to time feel like this. If I'm wounded and I'm a rock, not to be isolated, to be protected from the rest of the world, the island can give me protection, and an island can be a house too somewhere in metaphoric terms. If I have a nice vacation house, maybe in Switzerland, in a valley. By the way, the Swiss high valleys can also serve as islands in that sense. If I'm high enough up in the mountains or in the deserts or of the Sahara, I think that here the island notion can metaphorically stand for many different things. And obviously also we are all looking for protection from time to time, to be somewhere where we feel safe, because we are all human beings. We all have our disappointments in life, and from time to time you simply want to be on an island of peace, not to be disturbed by phone calls, not to be disturbed by anything, because the world is today very much connected. And sometimes I think we all wish that the smartphone would be less smart and give us a little bit more time to think. These are the ideas that crossed my mind when I listened to you. When listening to the three poems, I have to say, for me, I have much sympathy for the poems that we're all part of a bigger whole, that we're all part of a human destiny all together. And I think that the COVID pandemics of the last 18 months has shown this particularly, because for me, what I missed the most here in Tokyo, in Luxembourg, was the human contact. I'm very happy to have you today here assisting to our soirée philosophique here in Tokyo, shown by Zoom. And Zoom is a tremendous instrument, and we made progress during the pandemics, all I think, to learn to use this instrument. Still, I would be happy once to meet you in blood and in flesh here in Tokyo or in Paris, because I'm old-fashioned and a man from old Europe, and still I think that a human contact is very important. And these are the thoughts I have about islands. And for me, islands is a notion I have a positive association in my mind when I speak about an island. I do not like to see at the movies where islands become horrific places where an island is something nice. You're on the beach, you lay down, you listen to the waves, and you can look at the stars. In Eastern Mediterranean, obviously, you mentioned it with some air. Homer had for sure nice Odysseus had for sure nice evenings on the ship when he was traveling around in the Eastern Mediterranean, because for me an island is something beautiful. A nice island like Santorini, I have best memories about that island, and so I have only positive associations to islands. And again, here I speak here about islands which are maybe of a smaller size, because from a given moment on, an island may even be a continent. Voila, John, I do not know if that was now philosophical enough. That was simply a few thoughts that crossed my mind, and thank you for having given me the opportunity to speak here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your thoughts were very relevant, thoughtful, and interesting. And thank you for affirming the positive side of islands, both literal and metaphorical. I think it's really valuable to combine that perspective. As you said, whoever is narrating Paul Simon's song is a bitter man, a man in pain. And the song is so well written that you can still feel that, even on an old recording with limited orchestration. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's why I also wanted to quote Yeats, which is about a different way of isolating oneself, not bitter, but peaceful. But you're absolutely right. I also was brought up with the idea that islands are first and foremost a place of adventure, as in Robinson Crusoe, as in Treasure Island. But thank you also for mentioning prison islands, which is, I think, a very interesting aspect of the historical construction of islands. Building prisons on them is remarkably common. The Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dantes, is imprisoned in a very famous prison called the Château d'If off the coast of Marseille, which was in use as a prison until the 1970s. Alcatraz is an island. You mentioned Papillon, the island, the prison island of Guyana. And of course, Robben Island is where Nelson Mandela was locked up for 24 years with his companions. If you want to create a prison from which no one can escape, then you put it on an island. Doesn't always work, of course. Edmond Dantes escaped to become the Count of Monte Cristo, and one person, played by Clint Eastwood in the movie, escaped from Alcatraz. Anyway, thank you very much for your comments, and I too look forward to the opportunity to meet in the real world. Zoom, as you say, is a great tool. I couldn't have flown to Tokyo for the evening, even if there wasn't a pandemic, but it has its limits. I'd like now to give the floor to Dr. Yuko Hayashi, who is a professor at the Graduate School of Innovation and Technology Management at Yamaguchi University. What are your thoughts about islands, whether literal or metaphorical?
Hi, John.
Hi.
We met in France 4 or 5 years ago, and there is a conference held by Sonia. And
I remember well.
And I'm very happy to meet you again here. So yeah, you look same. So I was grown up in Japan, so that means I'm grown up in an island. So and my feeling of island is very comfortable, and then you can stay there if you want. But if you feel bored, you can go abroad. But nowadays, it's all the people is worried about there are few Japanese people go abroad and study in abroad. So the less people studying abroad, that's why the the way of thinking is become very conservative. And especially I am the technology area, and then the Japan itself, we still the many Nobel laureates, candidates, and then Nobel awarded people, but still we have to go abroad and learn more. And the diversity is a very important, and we better to know the different kind of way of thinking, and that is important to create a very innovative idea. So, but still, you can stay there and you can enjoy your life in Japan. So, and then in the pandemic, change our in the pandemic. Our situation become very obvious, and for example, the pandemic in Japan, people the total number of infected people is very low in Japan comparing to other country, for example, per million people, but still we really worry about the pandemic. And then we become so conservative. And even now, today, 100 people is affected a day today. For example, the France, maybe 20,000 people affected a day. So, but still, the European country looks enjoying their life now, even the pandemic is a high number. And then we really, we just started, the summer economic started, but still too conservative to open the country. And then for the foreign people, it's very difficult to enter the Japan, to work in Japan or to do the business in Japan. So yeah, I think this kind of a conservative way of thinking is very become remarkable in Japan in a pandemic. So, but we think it's after the pandemic, the world still in Japan is changing now, and we the so-called new age, new style after the pandemic is maybe this kind of digital transformation affected a lot. And then the way of a very conservative is way of kind of the thinking of old age people. And then we are because the pandemic, the digital transformation is proceeded. If we look at that kind of the Zoom meeting, before the pandemic, we couldn't do that. But now, usually, the normal people can do that, even you are not good at the digital things. So yeah, this changed the world tremendously. And even you stay in the island, yeah, you can communicate the people outside the Japan. And then our lifestyle is changing. So yeah, I think this new style, yeah, changing the island style as well. So that's the way I'm thinking now.
Thank you. That's a very interesting and useful comment. And it's true that if someone was rewriting John Donne's poem today, they would probably write it in a slightly different spirit. No man is an island entire of itself, because we're all connected through the internet. And I'm not really joking here. Now, of course, one of Don's key points is that even if you're literally on an island, you are still imaginatively connected to humanity as a whole. And of course, you are geologically connected to humanity as a whole as well. Islands don't float on the surface of the sea. They rise from the crust of the earth. And there's a connection to the earth through the roots of every island. But still, imaginative connection was always possible. Technological connection is something a bit new. And it means it's much more difficult to find a metaphorical island to have the kind of peace from the bustle of the world that Yeats was referring to. I remember my own experience of visiting Mongolia and being astonished at how good mobile phone reception was in the middle of nowhere. Of course, it wasn't nowhere to the people living there because nomads occupy space in a different way. But you can certainly get much better mobile connection in Mongolia than you can in many parts of France. And that's an interesting sideline. One of the results of this, as you know, is that in high-level, high-value executive education courses, it's often compulsory to check in your phone on arrival, and they give it back at the end of the course. Because if you can't create an island of peace within which to do whatever the course is designed to do, then it won't work because people will spend their whole time responding to emails. So that technological connection creates new pressures to create spaces of peace and relative isolation or insulation precisely from that hyper-connectedness, which I think is a very interesting angle on the traditional view of the island as isolated. It's what the word means, but it's also an idea of the island. And the idea that you might be far from the world, but at least on the island you would find peace. As you probably know, in order to finish 1984, George Orwell, who was in very poor health by then, felt the need to isolate himself in a very remote part of a Scottish island. As if without the peace to finish the novel, he might never have finished it in the circumstances of 1948 when he was writing it and given his poor health. So there's a lot going on there. And thank you for emphasizing that technological angle. I'm sure we will have questions from the audience a bit later, but for the moment, let me give the floor to Dr. Milanga. What do you think about all of this? What metaphorical or literal island ideas would you like to put on the table, given what's already been said?
Thank you very much for everybody having me today here. Yes, let me start by saying that philosophy has never been an easy matter to study everywhere. I remember in my Congo, in Central Africa, in the high school, the course of philosophy was always very difficult for me to understand. So first, UNESCO on this day of Memorial Day, UNESCO is linked to the education in the world. And the methodology you took today to talk about the idea of isolation is to go through the concept of an island. An island, for me, when I was born, okay, we are on the continental part of Africa, but we have island in the river or in the sea. Okay, it is a place which is separated from the other part by that stream of water. That's all. That the people on those islands, they are people like us. Being on the island, do they develop other way of seeing things? We don't know. It might be very possible. I think that we are in the process of, in fact, you took this methodology to talk about, in fact, isolation. And UNESCO is one of the institutions in the world that is fighting for, since it is there, isolation, because the idea of isolation bring us too close to the idea of, not to the idea, to the suffering of human beings. A lot of war come from misunderstanding between human beings. Some isolated them, they isolate themselves. They think that, okay, maybe if we isolate, we will solve the problem of being with the other. We think maybe differently. And usually it is leaders who will separate from one group for power to go to another place. Then in the methodology, the ambassador is saying that he's an islander, and we are not going to make judgment here. Islands are good, or the people who stay together in the continent are the best. We are not doing this today, judgment. In fact, you want to talk about, this is the process of education. You want to talk about isolation. And okay, the Japanese, they didn't come from one part of Asia to be isolated in this island, but they decided to stay in this island from where they come. We know the history, and they did good on this island. Okay, they did good, one of the most developed country in the world. This is the country that distribute money to all the countries of the world. Even the United States, they give money. When I came here 30 years ago, in a batch of scholarship, I had American, Australian receiving the scholarship of Japan. So they did good thing on this island. Okay. And the idea of isolation is very central to the life of human being. Just Professor there mentioned that, okay, she used the word, if you feel comfortable, because all the foreigners who've been in Japan for a long time, when we are in philosophical discussion with our Japanese friend, at one point they will tell you that, you know, we think like this because we are islander. We are a small island. It's very common in discussion with our Japanese friend. You know, you use the term if you don't feel comfortable with, very important in our discussion. We have seen the islander, the British, when they joined the EU, very few, maybe only 30% of the British understood all these economical mathematics and everything. The other people, they just follow the political leader. Now they leave. It's another story. There is a deep meaning behind this. But it's a way of seeing things. So the methodology, the UNESCO, someone like Mr. John, the UNESCO, to take this methodology to talk about one aspect of isolation is a very good methodology. We will not end on the idea of isolation and today. on my continent, everybody knows we are fighting on the tribe, to be in one tribe, in one clan. It is a kind of island also to isolate yourself. We are better than the other. If we stay alone in our corner, maybe we will not fight with them. So in order to avoid to fight with them, let's isolate ourselves. At one point, it may be good for some moment in the life of human being. Look, we wanted to isolate ourselves to be developed, clean, everything. But look the way the coronavirus is breaking barrier. So religious people, they are saying that, look, it's God who brought this thing in order to bring people together. Okay, so we will not finish this subject. There are many aspects of this subject. In Ireland, you don't do always good thing. You don't harm other people. Maybe if you isolate yourself for many reasons, it might be good for some moment, but some other time it's better to come together. And I think that this is the process this is what UNESCO has been doing for years, to try to bring people together despite their differences. Okay, and the very I think there is the concept of being together for human being is better than the concept of being separated. I think this is my the concept of sharing is superior than the concept of predation on other people, take things of other people, but sharing with everybody will be better. It's too idealistic. Maybe we will not meet it as long as we are on this earth, but it is semantic. It is a good approach to talk about the island. In fact, you want to talk about isolation or people coming together or people separating themselves. Which is good, which is wrong, it is very difficult to say. That's, I think, my comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very interesting comments. I have two short remarks before I give the floor to our fourth panelist, and then for a discussion with the room. I'm delighted to see that so many of you are following this conversation in Tokyo. So I hope that some of you will wish to make comments in a moment. The two comments are as follows. First, it's interesting how the word isolation, which literally means the quality of an island, from the Italian isola, which is the Italian version of the Latin insula, actually ends up in modern usage not having anything to do with islands at all. Because islands are about connectedness, not just separation. And that combination of connectedness and separation is how we make societies work through exchange and dialogue and trade and so on, but also through enough space for different groups of people to occupy the earth, each in their own way. But the language of isolation in modern English, and it's exactly the same in French. The only difference is that in French you have two words, as you do in English, but they follow the different linguistic path. Isolation in the English sense is isolement in French, whereas isolation means what the English call insulation, in particular in the context of electricity. So I think you're absolutely right to emphasize the fact that we shouldn't be thinking in terms of isolation. And islands do not have to be places of isolation. And the second point you raised, which others had also mentioned, is what the pandemic tells us about separation and connectedness in the contemporary world. And of course, the messages are ambiguous, though. One possible message of the pandemic is we were too connected, so viruses can circulate too fast, and we need to introduce barriers and separations to make sure that threats don't circulate at that speed. And in that respect, the virus is both a public health phenomenon and also a metaphor for other kinds of vulnerability. Think, for instance, of the vulnerability of computer viruses or the vulnerability of information systems to computer viruses. Those two, maybe we want to create barriers to, so that they don't circulate too fast. UNESCO has been mentioned several times. It's no longer for me to talk on behalf of UNESCO, but I can still comment on what UNESCO does. An important area of work for UNESCO with respect to the online world is the circulation of hate speech, with some important programs and publications that maybe you've seen on how barriers can be created to the circulation of hate speech, through online spaces. Again, no one wants isolation, but there are worries that maybe we have either too much connectedness or the wrong kind of connectedness, and that perhaps something needs to be done about that. So I'd be very interested in comments along those lines, plus, of course, comments on everything that has been said earlier. And with that being said, I'd like now to give the floor to our fourth panelist, Mr. Teddy Jimbo. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Joan. Nice to meet you, and nice to meet you, all of you, for those who I met and who I haven't. Actually, I'm not really a good person to talk about philosophy. I'm a journalist. From head to toe, I'm a journalist all my life.
That makes you a very good person to talk about philosophy. Let me quote Hegel here. Hegel said in a famous passage that the most philosophical thing you can do is read the morning paper.
Okay. Okay. Well, so it's for readers to philosophize, but we report. So okay, what I can do today, I can kind of throw in today is being a journalist, which means factual and informative. I give you some piece of information that I think it might have bear some relevancy to this notion of island from the reporting I've done, and maybe I will leave the philosophization process to the rest of you. Okay. Okay. I want to talk about two things about the island. As you know, there was just COP26 in Glasgow, as you all know. I have actually covered one small island in Pacific called Tuvalu. I have been to Tuvalu 10 times. It's aside from Vatican and those sort of city states, it's the smallest country. It's a country, by the way. It's a nation state. Tuvalu. It's part of actually a British Commonwealth. It has the Union Jack in the country flag, but it's about 8-hour ride from Australia, or actually it's faster if you go by Fiji. But anyway, you have to stop a few times from Tokyo to get to Tuvalu. Yeah, there are only 2 flights a week from Fiji to the capital of Tuvalu, which is called Funafti. And this airline almost tried to cancel the flight. I mean, the terminate the flight. So Tuvalu government had to buy the airline company in order to keep the country connected. I mean, imagine if you have no flight coming into your island, the only access to the island is by boat. I mean, what kind of isolation is that, right? So, but they have actually, surprisingly, very good internet connection, I believe on that. So I was able to file reports from there. I actually have written a book. It's in Japanese only, fortunately, but I have written a book on Tuvalu, and also I have produced several documentaries on the country. But anyway, it is a country with the 12,000 population of 12,000. and it has 8 islands. So it's got kind of 8 dots in their national flag that represents each island. Okay, it has 8 islands, and it might end up, having to change their flag because one of the island, I wouldn't say about to disappear, but it is on the verge of disappearing. So once they have, one island, one of the 8 islands disappears, they have to change the flag because each dots in their flag, national flag, actually, represents the island. But anyway, this is a very serious issue. There is definitely a sea level rise. The sea level around Tuvalu is rising. However, scientific data shows it isn't, and that's a big problem. I said sea level, right? Sea level, but probably, I don't know. We might have some scientists like Einstein, but probably none of you actually knows what the sea level is. I mean, sea levels changes every minute, don't they? So what's the sea level? What we say when you say sea level, what are we talking about? That's where the science, maybe philosopher needs coming here too. Okay, sea level is actually it's scientifically it's called mean sea level, or in layman's term they call it average sea level. Average sea level of each day is considered to be the sea level of that area, because it changes every day, and it goes up and down yearly and daily. So there's no one sort of a concrete level, sea level. It changes, right? So it's average sea level. You can have an average sea level of the day. You can have an average sea level of the month. You can have the average sea level of the year, but that's the only sea level you can actually measure. And the first question comes up to the mind journalists and to the scientists is, why can't we just say highest sea level and lowest sea level exist, and and the highest sea level, if highest sea level goes up, then people will be affected, even though the lowest sea level is going lower and lower. It doesn't help them, because when tides come in and their houses are washed away, then it doesn't matter if a sea level goes down very far. There's no such notion as the highest sea level scientifically, because sea level can change when, in case of a storm, if there's a big ship just coming by the meter, sea level meter, then there might be some high wave. So there's no such notion as the highest sea level and lowest sea level scientifically. They call it, for some reason, scientific term, insignificant. But it is significant to the people living there. That's the only significant number for the people who will actually live there. How high does the tide comes in, right? Because then your house might get washed away. But scientifically, it's one of the characteristics of the climate change. Highest sea level goes up, but lower sea level goes down. So average sea level almost stays the same, slightly going up, very slightly. But actual, on the human level, it is going going up much faster. However, the scientific data shows it's going up very slowly, very slightly. So that Tuvalu is making those claims, and the Prime Minister of Tuvalu appeared in the COP26 and appealed to the world that it was kind of showcase. He was like he was in the water, like how we're down, and we're going down. It's not that bad, yeah, of course, but the capital island of Funafuti, the highest point of the country, of the island, is about 10 meters, and that's the top of the water tank. So it's not actually a highest land point. Highest land point is about 2.5 meters above the sea level. So that's the highest, really the highest point, the land point in Tuvalu. So if you go there, you can see people's houses being washed away, and actually you can even find houses in the water, which they say used to be not in the water. I mean, you can't live, in the water, but science shows otherwise. So I don't know if we can philosophize that that actual phenomenon. High sea level scientifically does not exist. So if you want to indulge in the scientific discussions, you only talk about mean sea level. How sea level is measured is actually interesting. There's a sea level meter in 2 points in Australia. There's a Flinders University in Australia, and how they measure is there's a sort of the pipe in the water, and there is a sort of sonar point which transmits the sound, and it will hit the surface of the water and reflect it, and it will measure the time of how long it took between when it transmitted and it came back. And that's how sea level is measured. And sea level is measured there every 5 seconds. And you average it. You have to average it. That's the point. You measure every 5 seconds, but in the end you average it. So that's the average sea level. But we don't say it average sea level. We just say it's sea level. But that's what the scientifically what the sea level is. So you can probably easily fool other people with a very concrete scientific data that sea level is not going up. Look at this data. It's a very scientifically measured data. People have nowhere to go, so Tuvalu people are actually seriously considering immigrating en masse to either Australia or New Zealand because they want to preserve their culture. But if they have no country to live and no land to live on, and actually Australia and New Zealand is more or less forthcoming about accepting people, because like I said, they only have 12,000 people in total country in spread around 8 islands, and it's not that much. And they actually, many people from Tuvalu actually do work in New Zealand and Australia as a kind of seasonal workers. So anyway, that's what's happening in one small island in Southern Pacific Ocean. One other thing I just want to kind of throw in is about Japan. Japan is of course, island country, and in terms of the population density, I mean, Japan is it's the 62nd largest country in the world with the 378,000 square kilometers, which is not that small, which is about 20 times bigger than Britain, and also about 15 times bigger than Germany, and also it's even bigger than France. But I was checking my note. Actually, in Japan, only 30% of the land is inhabitable. You can actually live, use only 30% of this 378,000 square kilometers of land. And if you compare the percentage of the inhabitable land or inhabitable area to Britain or other countries, Britain has 84.6% of their land usable. They can use 84.6% of the land. So although Britain has only 2/3 of the Japan's land area, actually their population density is about half of Japan. Japan has twice more crowded than England, and in Japan, actually 80% of the population actually live in the land which is less than 5 meters above the elevation, 80%. So Japan is not Tuvalu. It's a big country, 62nd biggest country. And I don't know if any of you have seen, actually, we have an area in Tokyo called 0 meter chitai. 0 meter chitai meaning below zero area. There are actually already in Tokyo where you can actually stand inland, which is below sea level. But Japan is, I guess, rich enough to build a very thick, high concrete wall to prevent water from coming in. I think once water can start coming in, then actually, you know, 23 wards in Tokyo, 23-ku, Tokyo 23-ku. The water can easily cover up to Adachi-ku. But that's the elevation is less than 3 meters. It goes as wide as to Adachi-ku. So Japan, well, you know, I guess if you have enough money to keep building walls and keep putting, you know, walls higher and higher, I guess it's okay. But we are not just talking about one petty small island in Pacific, but it's actually in the whole world. That's not the only reason, you know, we should care about the climate change, but still, 65-67% of the population actually do live in the lowland in the world. People, for some reason, love to live in the lowland, not in the mountains. Everywhere. That goes everywhere in the world. Islands people have nowhere else to escape. So it's very serious and very sort of an immediate issue, but it's issue everywhere in the world, because most of us, including us in Tokyo, do live in a very, very low land, and there's only mountain in our back. So it's just a piece of sort of factual and informative piece of information for you guys. I don't know if you can philosophize what I said, but John, I'm sorry if I might have derailed your Simon Garfunkel, you know, the Yeats discussions, but that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You didn't derail anything. You gave some important additional angles. A reminder that islands are never isolated because they are connected through the crust of the earth. That's really important. As you know, there is a fantasy, a very common fantasy among libertarian billionaires of escaping the earth's crust. And there are two ways of doing that. One is rockets, as Bezos has done, as Musk does, with the dream of colonizing Mars or something. That's one way of escaping the Earth's crust. The other is to create an island that floats. And the way to create an island that floats is basically to make a very, very large cruise ship and have it permanently navigating the world's oceans. And this is a real plan, which has been developed in particular by Peter Thiel. One benefit of the plan for billionaires is that it would allow them, by always being in international waters, to escape all taxation. And who knows, maybe that's the real reason. It's possible, isn't it? Why would billionaires want to escape taxation? Well, yeah, precisely. But it's also a fantasy. And of course, as like many of these fantasies, it was already written down in fiction. This is the fantasy of Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne's novel, which is all about someone who has unmoored himself from human society by being permanently mobile in a submarine, an island, effectively, that owes nothing to anyone. Whereas, of course, Tuvalu, like any island in the real world, being connected to the ocean and to the ocean floor, is a dynamic environment which can be threatened and can also respond dynamically to change. And in that respect, since you raised ocean science issues, just a reminder of one of the most troubling aspects of sea level rise with respect to island viability, which many people don't realize, even though it's quite obvious when you think about it. Islands regenerate themselves in the face of sea level rise. Coral grows in response to sea level change, and sediment deposition recreates land that has been lost. But first of all, sediment deposition doesn't recreate the same kind of island, because it creates land that will take decades to consolidate, and in particular to become cultivable, including by losing excessive salt content. So you're losing land area that was valuable and gaining land area that is unusable. And this is one of the difficult paradoxes for many islands. They're actually growing in square meters, but they're still losing viability. And of course, people who want to deny climate change play with these figures in order to confuse the debate. And secondly, coral has a limit to how fast it can grow in response to sea level change, which means that if the sea is rising too fast, the coral can't keep up. At current rates, coral can keep up so long as it's healthy, but there's a fear that current rates might accelerate out of control. So there's a lot going on here. Plus, of course, the fact that if the oceans acidify to a significant extent, in the sense not of becoming acid, but of having a lower pH, then corals might end up being less healthy, including not just ocean pH, but also temperature issues. So there's a lot going on there, and a reminder that you can't philosophize about islands without keeping geography in mind. All of this is concrete, not just abstract. And one of the enemies of good philosophy is excessive abstraction. So thank you very much for bringing the concrete back into the discussion. You also brought concrete back into the discussion, of course, in another sense, which is quite interesting, which is the question of seawalls, which is a reminder that our relationship to the sea, whether on continental coasts or on islands, is a technological relationship, not just a geological one or an imaginative one. And what becomes an island, what an island becomes over time, is defined in part on deliberate management of that island to make it habitable and viable. And in that respect, concrete, the material, the construction material, is important here too, just as concreteness in the philosophical sense is important. Anyway, I think this has been a very rich discussion. We're not going to conclude anything, but we've opened up some very interesting paths to show why you can start with what looks like a geography question, islands, and end up with a very rich philosophical discussion. Now, there's an audience, which I can see as someone is moving the camera around, and maybe some of you in the audience would like to intervene. If so, you're very welcome. And of course, anyone following on Zoom is also very welcome to type a question into the discussion thread. And in that case, I will put it to the panelists on your behalf. Please, who would like to say something from the audience?
Hi, my name is Tatsuo. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm an investor, but that's irrelevant to tonight's discussion. So one of the things we're all reminded, I'm certainly reminded through COVID, since this is about being an island in time of COVID, is that there are borders that you can't actually travel across one place to another. And when I was little, we couldn't travel much because we weren't able to afford the airplane tickets for one thing, but the planes weren't flying very far anyways. Of course, these days things changed. We travel back and forth, and in this room, people represented by people with different nationalities here, which is remarkable. But then again, we're actually stuck here as well. Happily. And then for a year and a half, almost 2 years, a year and 9 months or so, we all experienced that we couldn't see our family members, kids, for example, us. Just today today is our third boy's birthday, so I wish them happy birthday on Zoom and everything, and do conversation, and I push the button, he's gone. Right? So yes, we're connected by Zoom, but then again, we're exactly connected. So I was feeling a sense of kind of happy, unhappy moment this morning. Hopefully, this isolation will end and soon, and we don't no longer have to feel like we're stuck in inactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, this experience of being limited in our ability to travel is a shock, precisely because we got used over 20, 30 years or so to the remarkable facility, ease of travel, which was much greater than 40, 50, 60 years ago. I can still remember when you needed to get your passport stamped to travel within Europe, for instance. You needed a visa to settle in another European country. It's not that long ago, to say nothing of all sorts of other barriers that existed for legal reasons or geopolitical reasons. There was a time of hyper-connectedness, both technological and legal, that made it much easier for anyone with money to travel around. And because travel had also become cheaper, you needed less money to be able to travel around the world. Will that be some kind of parenthesis when we look back from 2050 or whatever? That's, I think, a very important question, not in terms of making predictions, because predictions are a bit of a waste of time, but in terms of understanding what's at stake. There's no guarantee that we will come back to the status quo ante once the pandemic is over. In some sense, it's not clear that the pandemic will ever be over. As you know, one epidemiological hypothesis is that COVID-19 and its multiple variants will become endemic, like flu, but with a level of fatality that is about 10 times higher than flu. So if we have a seasonal disease with multiple variants against which annual vaccinations are required with limited guarantees as to their effectiveness, but 10 times more deadly than flu, how will we live with that? Seasonal flu is not a trivial disease at all. We live with it. All countries do. And it's been, as one says in British English, priced in the sense that everyone takes for granted that level of annual seasonal mortality. What if it's 5 or 10 times higher? I don't know. It's a transformation of the context within which public health decisions on travel restrictions need to be taken. What do you think? Will we get back to normal in mid-2022, as The Economist more or less announced in its most recent edition? Or is that just wishful thinking? Any thoughts? Philosophical thoughts, of course. I'm not asking for health predictions.
My name is Lori, and thank you so much for this presentation. It's a great topic, I think. But coming from the United States, I'd like to address a little bit different kind of isolation that I think we felt there as a result of all the polarization of politics. And I feel like people in the United States created islands and established these very different geographies, these very different cultures, and refused to cross the borders to understand each other. And I'd just like your take on that, because I think philosophically, creating these islands, these amorphous groups that don't share with each other, is that isolation that I think we spoke about with cultures, and also using technology to isolate ourselves politically. Just going back to what we would hope we would feel was John Donne's approach, that no man is an island and no group of people is an island. If we don't reach out to each other, we can't begin to understand each other.
Thank you. Very, very good point. The political scientist in me wants to answer in political science terms, but this is World Philosophy Day. So what do the panelists think about social polarization and how these philosophical reflections on islands can help us understand and perhaps counter social polarization?
Well,
Who would like to comment?
Responding to Lori's point, the internet actually, watching the U.S. politics often, it could help people build the wall, the seawall, rather than reaching out, because it's called, I guess it's called echo chamber. You can only, you only access information that you like to see, and you only associate with people that you feel comfortable with, instead of having to deal with the neighbors you just happen to be in a neighbor with. You don't usually have a choice, but on internet you do have a choice. If you don't like someone, you can just disconnect it and unfriend them, and then just deal with only with those who you feel comfortable, who you share value, so that you can reach more people, but more people like you. You can only reach out to people like you, like yourself, and it's not the actual actually what the reaching out probably meant to begin with. So unless you're conscious about what the internet can do, I think it can work both ways. It can help you to reach out to people, even in times of an epidemic, in times of isolation. But even during the time of, not when the COVID is rampant, or even normal, normal times, it can easily help building a very big walls, so that you feel you are surrounded with your friends, but the friends, all the friends are just like you, and like-minded people. And I've seen that beginning to happen a little in Japan, but I think the US is way ahead, 5-10 years ahead of us. Yeah, that's what I thought just mentioned. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? But
thank you. Please go ahead.
Maybe I may come back to that notion about praised by you. I'm fully convinced that Tom is right in the world of today. We are all part of one world. When we look at the big problems, Teddy has mentioned one is climate change with islands in the South Pacific. It's one of those issues. We cannot find, and not any country in the world can find a solution to it. Only we call that in diplomacy global governance. This is abstract word, global governance. Is global governance now good enough? Journalists, I have here one to my right, they will immediately tell us to the diplomats that global governance is not good enough. But we are all together doing global governance. We are all responsible for it, and it is, there are also reasons to it. The challenges we are facing are also very big challenges. And John has mentioned, I listened carefully what you have been saying, John, about COVID and about the return to the world before, as I would wish for. This we will see in the next 12 months. It is also very much to do with medications that come out, and it is about how is that new virus going to become endemic. We need to see, and there are many challenges that we are facing right now. Still, us to be optimistic when we look at it. Imagine only if with what the kind of a speed that these new vaccines have been developed. So there's much sense, also reason to be optimistic. Technology is not only a problem, technology has many solutions to our problems. And to the issues in your specific country, it's not up to me to comment. I would only like to say that in the world we are in, too much information may kill information. It is a big problem today when you look and when you are surfing through the internet. We're speaking about isolations, and isolationism is a new word that comes up in politics. It's one person used the terminology of fake news. I do not like to speak about fake news per se, but there's much news in the world which, when I read it, I do not agree with it because there are factual mistakes in it. And to come to good information, that is also something very difficult also for journalism. High quality journalism is something that I truly enjoy when I have to deal with high quality journalists. And the journalists it's difficult to go into the depths of the problems. And also I think that people, what Don said, we are all part of one world, and it is our perception to it. We also need to listen to each other. It sounds like a priest in the church, but very often when you are in different cultures, we can use the same words. We even listen to each other, still we mean different things. And so it is, these things take much time. But in the very end, I know that now Teddy would not agree with me. The question is always, is the glass half full or half empty? And in Glasgow last week, I know what happened in the last minutes, was it good or bad, but when we look at it in the overall technological challenges and with the kind of population growth we have worldwide, with the United Nations Millennium Goals to give to everybody clean water, even on islands in Tuvalu, they need, to some extent, the water is a threat, but without clean water, clean, sweet water, nobody can live. And so that is the true challenges of the world of today. And here I think that, and that's why in my first intervention, I was very positive about Don. I love the song of Simon and Garfunkel. I also agreement with an island of peace. But I think that the issues that we are facing right now, that Don has much more of a key to it in a philosophical way than anybody else, because we need to work together. And in the United States, I think people also need to work together and will work together. I have much trust, nevertheless, in the common sense of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question in the discussion thread. I don't know if you're following it, from Vikas Atal about cinema. And it's true that we've referred to films at many points during the discussion as part of the imaginary of islands. And the question is, how can cinema create connectedness? It's a very big question. I don't think we can answer it, but maybe one or other of the panelists would like to say something about the power of film to respond to this challenge of creating imaginative connections, even in the face of physical separation. Any comments on the role of film, and we could add of literature, of other media, of circulation of ideas, images, and thoughts? Including from others in the audience, if there's someone who has expertise in this area.
We are the loud corner. We were the ones saying along to Simon and Garfunkel. I have some thoughts about film, and that's what Son's comments resonated with me. And I was thinking about how to tie all this together. And one thought that comes to mind is film in the sense of a documentary. Your other panelist, forgot your name, I apologize, the ambassador from Luxembourg, but mentioned that we have a problem with too much information, a lot of disinformation. And my thought is that right now, it's very difficult to say, you know what the facts are, but there are a lot of people that choose to believe facts that are convenient so that they can support whatever agenda they have, whether they want to deny that global warming is taking place, or they want to deny that fossil fuels have something to do with it, so they disseminate all these all this false information. Well, the same thing is happening in the United States regarding the COVID pandemic and vaccines. And maybe the poetic justice in all of this is that the people who are denying that the vaccines are effective are the ones that are unfortunately dying from the pandemic, from COVID in much higher numbers. So in a sense, if we did a documentary on that and exposed the reality and the truth of what's really going on, maybe after the pandemic, people could again begin to respect authoritative sources of facts and not go out of their way to discredit science and say that science doesn't know what it's talking about, because science is the way that we are going to overcome the pandemic and also future pandemics, as well as, hopefully, if we can do it, use science to overcome global warming and the other existential threats to man's future. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's very consistent with what was said earlier. One of the difficulties, of course, both in terms of COVID and in terms of climate change, is that the scientific knowledge is abstract. And it's abstract for a profound reason, not just because scientists are bad at communicating or whatever. In fact, many scientists are very good at communicating. It's that scientific knowledge about these phenomena is, as philosophers say, counterfactual. It confers a description of the world with tools that are quite complex and sophisticated, but still you can simplify what that means with a description of what the world would be if some factor didn't exist, what the world would be like if there was no COVID-19 virus, for instance, what the world would be like if there were no human-induced emissions of greenhouse gases, or if greenhouse gases didn't actually affect the climate in the way that they are analyzed to. And of course, you can't observe the counterfactual situation. You can only build it analytically through equations and models and experiments and inferences. This, on the one hand, of course, opens the door to the kind of criticism that it's not empirically grounded, which is on the whole pretty silly and ignorant of how science actually works, but it also creates a real communication barrier. For instance, when scientists say, as they do, that climate change subject to certain conditions can increase the likelihood of certain kinds of extreme weather events, such as fires, storms, and so on, they're saying something that is actually very difficult to understand in common sense terms, because you can never look at a phenomenon and say that it was or wasn't likely. Likelihood can only come from a very abstract construction of the probability curve of phenomena like that. But of any particular phenomenon, you can only say it happened. Even the most unlikely things, once they've happened, happened. And people have great difficulty with this because it's a very abstract notion. You will sometimes be told, for instance, that a certain election result couldn't have been unlikely because it happened. Well, yeah, it was unlikely and it happened. Lots of unlikely things happen. Doesn't make them less unlikely, because the level at which they happen, the concrete level of observation, which is accessible to common sense, is very different from the probabilistic statement of how likely it is that things like that might happen in a given time interval, which is pretty much inaccessible to common sense, even if you understand the tools that scientists use my apologies, there was a temporary problem with the microphone. But I think you get my point. Abstraction is difficult to communicate on. And a lot of the science wars on social media or in public debate in certain countries these days around climate change and COVID and 5G mobile technology and all sorts of other things are ultimately debates about the illegitimacy of abstraction. If I can't see it and touch it and make sense of it with my own common sense, then it must be some kind of hoax or scam or conspiracy, which is simply not true. But try convincing people it's not true. That's very hard. I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but it sort of bounces off it and perhaps complements the discussion. I think, Sonia, it's for you to say how we are in terms of time. I don't know if Sonia is close to a microphone. Is it time to close the discussion, or is it time to invite possible other comments from the audience? Is Sonia available to answer?
We were trying to do the dessert. Sorry, John.
Is it time to close the discussion or not?
I can see if anybody from the guests want to participate and has question or comments.
Thank you very much for the topic of island and pandemic. Obviously, that creates already some sort of a honey trap, because we are then seemingly forced or sort of focused on the pandemic as we experience right now. But I think it's an opportunity to think about this issue of isolation as you bring up, and abstraction itself is an act of isolation. When you look at the etymology of the word, to pull back or to reduce from a complex observed or experienced environment into something you can handle. And as such, I feel our discussion or our dealing with what we experience right now needs to go much further than just trying to react on what is put forward to us or what we seemingly experience, and try to understand what happens. Why did we get into such a global predicament, and why did we get into such a global synchronized experience? And I think this topic of yours, the island, could be a very good thread or lead or reference point to seek understanding of what happened to us in the past 100 or several hundred of years. It comes to mind that the Emperor Go-Toba in Japan, who was exiled to an island in the north, in Shimane, the Oki, it's called Oki Island. There's some nice poetry of his when he approaches this island, full of unease and not knowing what is going to happen to him, and still he has to go there. And so this aspect of an island as something we approach, we don't know what is in front of us, but sort of ask us to use our ability to trust and to have hope, or to build, to construct, so to build visions also, is something which was very important, and which also is in the foundation of our Western way to look at things, and building all sort of apparatus and machines to observe and to understand deeper, but at the end also to abstract, to isolate by transforming our observation into equations, into models, and the technology going along with that, also through our own involvement and exercises, allows for much deeper complexities to handle. And I personally think that this sort of increase of leverage is something we somehow feel uncomfortable with, and sort of almost produces the reverse effect. While in the early stages that was allowed some understanding, deeper understanding, reaching out in areas we couldn't physically reach. But now it seems to me there is some turning point where the complexity gets so much that the calculations take over rather than our own ability to build these equations or machines or apparatus to further explore and to deeper and to go deeper. And this, I think, is the issue we need to look and see how we can deal with that. In simple terms, we could say this is about trust, as opposed to calculated or approved or confirmed facts or whatever science. The power of trust is something which connects people, also as an island, not knowing what the other does, but assuming that it's good, that assuming that he has same positive aspirations and intentions, but we don't know, and we don't need to confirm. Now we confirm when we go to an island, we confirm before with Google Earth or any ratings, quotings. We look at what the place looks like, we will look what the weather will be like. So it's all about confirmation, all about confirmation and insurance, rather than saying, well, I just go and I will see and I will accept whatever happens. That would be trust. So this ability or inability to produce trust, I think, is the biggest issue we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interesting comment. As it happens, trust is one of my new business lines with a French company called Trust Inside, which is actually specialized in trust-related services, consultancy, training on issues to do with trust. If you find it interesting, you can check out the website, www.trustinside.fr, and feel free to get in touch if you want to know more about what my business partners and I are doing in this area. But that would be very much a sidetrack from the present discussion. I think it's time to move towards the close by inviting each of our panelists in the same order as they intervened at the beginning, to make it simple, to share their last words. Last words, of course, only for this evening, Tokyo time. There'll be other opportunities to discuss these things. So please, Mr. Ambassador, would you like to share your closing thoughts?
Thank you. So closing thoughts on open topic is always difficult. I think that we had a very rich discussion for the evening about the notion of an island. As we started, we have was very comprehensive. When I look through the beginning from a song from Simon Garfunkel to go to climate change, there is a bridge to there is a gap to bridge here, and I think that that it should be a soirée philosophique, as I was told by our host, and I think in that respect, philosophy. I had philosophy at school, was like my friend to my left, a bad student in philosophy. But I remember that you should always be careful to conclude on philosophical issues. So I will simply leave it by this, and I have enjoyed the discussion. And my thank you to the host, to you, John, in Paris. I wish you good progress and success in your endeavors for trust, because I indeed believe, as I have said before, too much information is killing information, that there's a trust issue in the world right now. And when we look back to it 10 years ago, the smartphones, the social media, these are issues, technological evolutions that have transformed the world of the media, as a world how information is spread to people. This is something very new, and I think many of the issues we are facing right now has also to do with these technology revolutions in the way that today everybody through Facebook or he can be his own TV show. You record something and you put it on Facebook, And if you are successful, you are your own TV station, and that has something to do with when I say too much information is killing information. Thank you to everybody, also to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, if we need a bridge, then Simon and Garfunkel can provide one with probably their most famous song. So you can always play Bridge Over Troubled Waters at the end to mark that connection between islands and bridges. Dr. Hayashi, what would you like to say in closing?
Thank you very much for the fruitful discussion each other. And I remember the word, the Canadian country, Canada has a mosaic community, and that each part has their own personality, but respect each other, and even their tribe is different, and their language is different. They respect each other. Yeah, I think the island idea, island itself has their own personality, and also the technology, the sometimes make isolated society, but the society each other respect each other, and then to make a music community. Yeah, I think what I want to make the hope for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're building metaphors here in a very interesting way. And if presumably the adhesive, the cement that will allow the mosaic to function is trust, if I follow you. So what else do we need for the mosaic? Please, your final comments, Dr. Milanga.
Thank you very much for everybody. And I'm very happy being in this country where each of us here in Tokyo can be somewhere where you can be making money now. But we still have people who want to gather together to discuss about the philosophy. It doesn't bring, only Sonia could bring bread on the table for us, but all of us, we could bring here idea, and it's very important. I'm very happy to see that still we can have time to discuss about this kind of very important subject. The word trust came, and there is a problem of trust in the world. When the Peace Corps created by JFK came to my country in Congo in 1961, I was 6 years old, in a very, very, not in the capital city, but in a very, very small city of Congo, in a missionary school. And the priest talking to us about JFK. John, he brought this kind of idea, such kind of things. So it was regenerating even very far. But to see today that I don't name people, and the leader of a country like that to be misleading. This is the country that sent the first men on the moon, but leader of a country like that disagreeing with science for a vital issue like this. You know, for us, the medical doctor, Dr. Fauci of this institution in the USA, we have a Bible in medicine, which is Harrison Principle of Internal Medicine. And student in the 3rd grade of medicine in Congo, that Fauci doctor was on that book of Harrison. So these are authorities of a very respected institution in the US, and to see top leader of the country disagreeing with sides and misleading people. It was a very, very sad things, and only really leadership can solve the problem of trust we are facing now. So we hope that in Japan there was election just 1 week back. Everywhere people will have enough wisdom to select good leader that could lead the world toward a better tomorrow. That's my last word. Trust. We are facing a problem of mistrust. We should regain trust for all the people of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that this discussion should conclude on trust, including in its relationship with peace. Just as a point of information, again, please get in touch with me if you want to know more. We're actually working hard to make the concepts and methods of trust that have been developed by Trust Inside available to Africa. My business partner, who's the real trust expert in this business, was actually in the Central African Republic just last week, trying to help the city of Roppongi make some progress in this area. We have a project which we're rolling out in Cameroon. We're talking to people in Guinea-Conakry, and we'll be very pleased, of course, to consider other possible activities, because we're convinced, as you said, that peace and trust are essentially two ways of saying the same thing, though the connections might be quite complex, and that building trust isn't just a vague aspiration. It's something you can actually work on with metrics and methods. You can, as we say in our jargon, objectify trust in order to make it manageable. And I didn't expect that the discussion would end up at this point with me doing effectively a business pitch for our services, but let me do it anyway because it seems very relevant, because all of you have said it. Obviously, that would need to be followed up on another occasion. And finally, Mr. Jimbo, your closing comments.
Okay, well, I don't have very much to say, but since John mentioned another Simon Garfunkel song, the Bridge Over Troubled Water, the song I love, and there is a theory that, we assume that it's a song about his important friend. We can, count on your friend, so forth. But just like, it's back in 60s, I mean, you can imagine, like Lucy in the Sky and the Diamond or Hey Jude, songs about drugs, right? There is theory that this is a song about drugs, but I don't believe it. I will just read out the very important part. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Or when times get rough and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. I love this song very much, and I think it's nice if we can all be a bridge. Since we're talking about island, the island can be everywhere, not geographically, mentally, spiritually, but if all of us can be on a bridge to someone, to other people, to yourself, that'd be nice. I think that's my last word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we need islands and we need bridges, and it is somewhere in the connection given by bridges between islands, each of which offers some peace and some distinctiveness in the mosaic, that the conditions of peace, not just within each person, but between people, can perhaps be established, which sounds very UNESCO, building the defenses of peace in the minds of men and women. So that's probably a very good place at which to end in an event co-sponsored by UNESCO's MOST program. Thank you very much for participating. It was a very great pleasure to spend the Tokyo evening with you in the middle of the Paris day. And I hope there'll be other opportunities to do the same. And who knows, perhaps at some point, all meeting together in the same room. Sonia, as the host and co-organizer, would you like to say anything to declare the meeting closed?
Again, it's such a pleasure to kickstart our programs together, John, after almost 2 years of not having done any conferences together. I would, if you had the chance, what we had talked about for December philosophy night, if you could give a teaser to the audience here. Talking about
yes,
and
a teaser. It's actually a teaser of a teaser, because we have decided that we will focus the discussion in December on signs. And of course, signs are a teaser. That's the whole point. And one of the reasons we picked this theme is the calendar. This will be the Christmas dialogue. And while not everyone celebrates Christmas, everyone can at least reflect on the story. And of course, the story of Christmas starts with a sign, a star in the sky that leads people to a place where something is supposed to happen. But of course, a star in the sky doesn't mean anything unless you have a framework of interpretation to give meaning to it, because otherwise it's just a light. So how do you know that a light in the sky means something, that it's a sign of an event to come? Of course, in the biblical story, the answer is prophecy. But in other contexts, the answer could be science. We know that certain things are signs of impending climate change, for instance. And we can look with the tools of science at how those signs lead us to imagine possible future events. And one of the interesting things about human culture is that it's absolutely full of signs and the challenge of interpreting them and the constant risk of getting it wrong, taking for a sign something that wasn't a sign. And I would close with a quote from Sigmund Freud on that point. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. We are refining our ideas, and hopefully you guys will be here next time, and as our discussions grow and people will be more into our evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Is Camille, would Camille have the chance to say closing words too? Or John?
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, so I'm also in Paris, like John. Just a quick closing word. Just would like to thank the Dilo Marti Foundation, of course, for making this event possible. And obviously John, that we deeply miss here at UNESCO. Just to let you know that we have also a philosophical relay going on around the world right now. So I'm also glad that the Roppongi Dialogue are joining this global initiative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kenny.
Okay, goodbye, John. Talk to
Goodbye
you soon.
to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Excellent. Very interesting.
My pleasure.
Just getting started.
You see, hope to see me.
It's wonderful to be able to do this.